Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Thank you for joining us for the broadcast. I'd like to extend this personal invitation for you to come join us in one of our spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., our Sunday morning worship is at 10 a.m., and our Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. Come join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Hey, we'll save a seat for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
And 14 tonight. So we got a lot to cover. So let's start off with Exodus 13, verses number 1 and 2. Okay, go ahead. Tell us what, because you've been studying, you've been going, I'm ready for him to ask. So go ahead, tell us. Okay. And what was the last plague? Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. The firstborn died. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, get out of here. All right. Okay. All right. Very good. All right, let's look at Exodus 13, chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn. Whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both man and of beast, it is mine. So the idea was that the firstborn was to be set apart for God. And whether it was man or beast, they needed to set the firstborn apart. Okay? So the firstborn belonged to God. It goes back to the first fruits. God wants your first fruits, and that's what he's saying. I want your firstborn. All right? And there's three reasons for this. First, because Israel was God's firstborn. As you go down through Israel, they go back through all the way back to Adam, and it goes down, and Israel was God's firstborn. Okay? And this practice honored that fact that they were God's firstborn. Second is because the firstborn was thought to be the best. Not always so, but anyway, no. But they were thought to be the best. The firstborn was, and the best, you always give the best to God. Okay? And finally, it was a reminder to all generations of when God redeemed Israel, his firstborn, from Egypt. All right, let's look at verses 3 to 7. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out of the month Abib. And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast unto the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. So basically what he's doing is he's showing the purity of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this purity followed upon the blood deliverance of the Passover. And this illustrates the principle that we can only walk in purity before the Lord after the blood deliverance at the cross. We have to have that blood deliverance at the cross before we can be pure and walk in that purity before the Lord. And at the same time, the days of unleavened bread were not joyless. They began and they ended with a feast. And a walk of purity in the Lord is a life filled with joy. When you're walking in purity with God, it should be a life filled with joy. You know, we see too many Christians nowadays that walk in purity or try to walk in purity or say they're walking in purity, and they're some of the most miserable people you ever seen in your life. Okay? But being in purity with the Lord is not supposed to be a downer. It's supposed to be a time of joy. You're supposed to rejoice in it, not be all down and look like you've been baptized in pickle juice. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an upper, not a downer. So, yeah, it depends on where you work, but even then, we need to walk in joy to say, hey, at least I have a job. There are a lot of people out there that don't. Okay. Well, that's true too. All right, 8 through 10. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, this is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year. So God wanted the deliverance from Egypt to be constantly at hand, to be constantly before their eyes. And Jews use this passage along with Deuteronomy 6, 4-9 and 11, 13 to 21 to institute the practice of wearing phylacteries. The phylacteries are small boxes that hold parchment, and they have scripture in them, and they will attach them to the forearm with leather straps, or they'll attach them to the forehead. Okay? Huh? Yeah, that little box that you see some of the Jews you'll see wearing sometimes, that little box. That's what that is. Okay? But later, Jesus condemned the use of wearing these among the Pharisees. They made these boxes large and ostentatious, and it was supposed to be a display that showed that they had greater spirituality than everybody else. Yeah, they made fancy boxes and big boxes on them because they're more spiritual than everybody else. Yeah. Well, kind of, yeah. But in the end times, there is going to be a satanic imitation of this practice. Care to guess what that is? The mark of the beast. Okay? When the number of the Antichrist is going to be applied either to the hand or the forehead to all who take it. Okay? Huh? For all that take it. It's going to be the forehead or the hand to those who receive the mark of the beast. So it's an imitation of wearing those boxes. But it says that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. Okay? So this shows that God did not command for literal boxes to be tied to the hands and the head, because to take it this way, it means that there should be a box put in the mouth. And nobody does that. Okay? The very fact that language like this can be used of the Feast of Unleavened Bread shows it to be a pure metaphor. It's not a literal thing. All right, 11 through 16. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he sware unto thee and to thy fathers, and shall give it thee, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix, and every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord's. And every firstling of an ass that thou shalt redeem with a lamb. And if thou wilt not redeem it, then thou shalt break his neck, and all the firstborn of man among thy children shalt thou redeem. And it shall be, when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beasts. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thy hand, and for the frontlets between thy eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. So, this, yes. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, but yeah, that's not what they meant. They didn't mean the Matrix. They didn't know about the Matrix then. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Huh? The Matrix, what they're talking about, is comes out of the womb. Okay? So this was the law of dedicating the firstborn to God. You had to dedicate the firstborn to him. And it was only to take effect when in the promised land. In other words, they were supposed to hold off until they got to the promised land. And by then, the need for a reminder of the work of deliverance from Egypt would be all the more necessary. And if the firstborn was unacceptable to sacrifice, a substitute was offered to redeem the firstborn from God. If the firstborn was an animal, the substitute had to be a clean animal. If the unclean was human, what do you think? They threw him away? No, it doesn't. You don't have to substitute it with another human. No, that's what they had to do with that. But they had to substitute, if an unclean firstborn was there, they had to substitute it with money instead of anything else. Okay? The practice.
So it's going like the firstborn, whether it's animal or child.
Uh-huh.
So if you have a dog, I don't guess they had dogs back then.
Well, yeah.
Had a goat or a sheep
Uh-huh.
as your first, and then you had a child later on. Was your child safe?
Yeah, no, your firstborn, you did the firstborn of every animal, the firstborn sheep, if it was a sheep, a goat, a donkey, whatever it was, the firstborn from each animal had to go.
From each animal?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the firstborn from all the human children. Now the firstborn was given to God in sacrifice, but the firstborn human baby was not given in sacrifice, it was just dedicated. Okay? So they weren't going around killing babies at the time. All right?
But they did at one time.
They had their rituals and their rules as to what was clean and what was unclean. So that's how they determined it. But yeah, usually so. Whether they were clean and unclean. Yeah. But if the firstborn child, human child, was unclean, then they could be redeemed. In the animals, it could be redeemed with another animal, the sacrifice of another animal. If it was a human, then they had to be redeemed by paying money to the temple or to the priesthood. Okay? So through ritual of God's great work and strong power for Israel, that would be their reminder of everything. Okay? I know we kind of tend to frown on rituals sometimes, especially in the Protestant churches. We tend to frown on rituals and say, oh, well, but rituals, to an extent, are kind of important because they help us remember. They give us a means to remember. And by having that ritual that it continues on, and it's the same thing over and over and over again, that's what helps us to constantly remember. And it's not the meaning and the meaning of it is not lost throughout the years. It's always been the same as we go along. Like communion, yeah, okay, communion, baptisms, dedications. See, we still do that. We still, especially the firstborn, we need to dedicate our firstborn to the Lord. And that's where you bring them up and you dedicate them there. Now, that doesn't mean that's the only one that needs to be dedicated. They all need to be, but especially the firstborn. Okay? Okay, the firstborn. The firstborn is the one because Israel was God's firstborn. So God looks at the firstborn with favor. Okay, and it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near, for God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. So the coastal route would have been shorter. They could have gone the coastal route around and got to Canaan, and it would have been a lot shorter way. But, and this was also the most common way to go from Egypt to Canaan. But it was a road that had military outposts on it, Egyptian military outposts on it. And God knew that the people of Israel were not ready to face this just yet. So, God led them a different way. Took them the long way around. What we used to say, roundabout by Laura's house. Okay? It would have been easy for the Israelites to think that the way of the sea was the way to go. Because they had good roads. It was the shortest distance. It was a trade route. So they would be able to get food and water as they needed it. But the dangers of the way were too great. And even though they could not see them, God anticipated the dangers that they could not see. So the Red Sea first mentioned here is not the huge expanse of the Red Sea. Okay? The Red Sea is some 100 miles wide. So it was, think about that. That's from here to almost, to Conway. That's pretty wide, right? But the western finger of the Red Sea, kind of the peninsula of it, it extends up unto the border areas of Egypt. It's basically the modern-day Gulf of Suez. Okay, so when we pictured that the Egyptian or that the Israelites went across the Red Sea, it wasn't at the widest point. They didn't have to go 100 miles across the Red Sea. It was a much shorter way that they had to go across. Verse number 19, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones away hence with you. So in a great act of faith, Joseph asked that his bones be taken from Egypt. If you remember back in Genesis chapter 50, verse 25. And he did this because he knew that Egypt was not their final resting place. but that God had promised a land for them. And then Genesis 50, 25, and 26 says specifically that Joseph was never buried. His coffin lay above ground for 400 or more years until it was taken back to Canaan. Basically, it was a silent witness in all those years that Israel was going back to the promised land, just as God had promised. The Egyptians never messed with it. Okay? And now, that promise is being fulfilled. All right, verses 20 to 22. And they took their journey from Sukkoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud that led them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So God showed his presence to the children of Israel in a pretty dramatic way here, by giving them that constant assurance with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. This was the Shekinah glory, or divine dwelling place of God. And it was the continual proof of the presence and the protection of God. Israel could draw great assurance from the visible evidence of God's presence. Nevertheless, there were still many occasions after this when they seemed to doubt, to rebel, and to act as if God was distant from them. And that completes chapter 13. Now, yeah, chapter 13 wasn't that long. Okay, let's get into chapter 14. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Pihahiroth and Migdal, and the sea over against Baalazephon. Before it shall ye encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the children of Israel, They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. So, basically, we can say God set up an ambush for Pharaoh here. Okay? Even after the horror of the death of the firstborn, in which Pharaoh was affected by, the change in Pharaoh's heart was only temporary. Remember, after all that happened, he said, just get out of here. Take what you want and go. But it was only temporary. He was quick to strike at Israel when he had the chance. He said, they're entangled in the land. In other words, they're just wandering around. They don't know what they're doing. We've got them blocked in. And this is exactly what God wanted Pharaoh to believe. Yeah, he was baiting them. God told Moses to lead Israel in the way that looked confused. In other words, instead of going straight to where they were going, it was, we'll go over here for a little while, then we'll go over here for a little while, and then we'll go back over here, and then back over here, and then back up. So it looked like they didn't know where they were going or what was going on. They looked like they were wandering aimlessly. Okay? The lost sheep. And God told Moses and Israel to do something that looked confused, because God would gain honor over Pharaoh through it. Verses 5 to 9. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people, and they said, Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot, and took his people with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with the high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen, and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea, beside Pihahiroth, and before Baal-Zephon. Try saying those names real fast 10 times. Okay. But now this was kind of a strange question for Pharaoh to ask. Why did we let them go? You know? Well, I mean, all the stuff that happened, and he knew all the stuff that happened, and now they're gone, and he goes, why did we do that? Why did I let them go? It wasn't difficult to think of at least 10 good reasons why he let them go. The 10 plagues. But why Pharaoh let Israel go was because of that. And this demonstrates how we are often quick to forget what God has done and demonstrated. God will do something, and a lot of times we'll be kind of quick to forget about that. Perhaps Pharaoh thought that the plagues were the limit of God's power, and that now he could successfully strike against Israel because now they're out of Egypt. And the Egyptian gods seem to only be powerful in Egypt. Now that they've gone out of Egypt, perhaps Pharaoh was thinking, yeah, their God he's limited, just like our gods are. Now, I'm going to go after him. There's an analogy in this to the spiritual life. We sometimes think that Satan's going to let us go easily. Or we think that once we leave his kingdom, Satan's kingdom, he's going to forget about us. Yet, just like Pharaoh after Israel, Satan is going to pursue us, attempting to keep us at least on the fringes of his domain, and hoping to destroy us if he can. Now, Pharaoh had the best military resources of that time. Chariots were the most sophisticated military technology of the day. They were the tanks, the armored personnel carriers. They were top of the line military equipment. And Israel, they didn't have anything. All they had was boldness. The Hebrew word here for high-handed or with boldness when they left, that word is ruum. And it includes the idea of rebellion against authority. So the rebellious nature of Israel was good when it was against Pharaoh and all that Pharaoh stood for. But it was bad when it was against the Lord and against Moses and against all they stood for. And the trouble with most rebels is that they rebel against the wrong things sometimes. Hey, have you ever rebelled against the wrong thing? Yeah. All right, verses 10 to 12. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. So in other words, Israel's going, what are you doing? Why did you take us away? We were better off in Egypt than we are here, wandering around in the desert. And it makes sense for Israel to be afraid. You look at it. They could see Pharaoh's armies coming on one side, and on the other side of them was the Red Sea. They seemed to have no chance of escape. They were blocked in. It seemed that God led Israel into a trap, that there was no way for them to escape, except back the way they had come. And the Egyptian army had that path blocked. So Israel cried out to the Lord. They did the right thing. When we find ourselves in dangerous places with no easy escape, we need to cry out to the Lord. We don't need to just throw our hands up. We need to cry out to the Lord. Psalm 46:1 tells us that God is our refuge and our strength. Their fear and their cry to the Lord made sense. Yet their words to Moses showed very little faith. And it showed a loss of confidence in what God could do. Now, no reasonable mind could really think that Moses had planned all this. Yeah. They didn't. There's no way that Moses says, okay, I'm going to lead you to the Red Sea where we can't get away and let Pharaoh's army come up and kill us all. No reasonable person would do that. Okay? Moses didn't do or say anything that would support such an accusation either. But the children of Israel still thought this way. Israel wasn't even a week out of Egypt at this time, and they had already distorted the past, thinking that it was better for them in Egypt than it really was. Has that ever happened to you before? To where something happens and you get out of something that's rough, and then you get into something else and you think back and say, well, I didn't have it so bad with that before, but you really did. We distort the past sometimes. And that's what they were doing. Okay, verses 13 and 14. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. At this point, Moses had no idea how God was going to help them out of this situation. All he knew is that God would help them out of the situation. So, huh? Yeah. In a sense, Moses knew that he was in such a bad situation that God had to come through. You see? Don't we get that way? When we see that our only help is God, then we're more likely to trust in him. If we have no other alternative but to trust in God, then we trust in him. It's like the lady that was constantly having to go to the doctor, and she was always coming into church and telling everybody that, she had all these problems and had all these problems. And finally somebody came up and said, well, have you prayed about it? And she says, my goodness, has it come to that? It was the last resort, was the prayer. But she was in such a situation now that she had to turn to God, and she was more likely to trust in him. Sometimes it's in the little things that we think we can do on our own and by our own strength. Those are the things that get us down, not the big things that we know only God can do. It's the little things that we think that we can take care of ourselves. We don't have to have God do it. I can take care of that. I don't need to bother God with this. I can do it. But we have to involve God in all of it. We can't just not do it that way. We have to always involve God. And Moses told the people of Israel to stop. This is often the Lord's direction to the believer in a time of crisis. Stop. Slow down. Despair will cast you down and keep you from standing. Fear will tell you to retreat. Impatience will tell you to do something now. Presumption will tell you to jump into the Red Sea before it's parted. Yet as God told Israel, he often tells us, simply stand still and hold your peace, and he'll reveal his plan. Said Moses didn't know what God would do, but he knew what the result would be. He knew that God would save his people and that the enemy of the Lord would be destroyed. He told them, "Ye shall see them again no more." And the idea behind this implies much more than at first look. Moses perhaps spoke in terms of eternity as well as in the present time. So you're going to see them again no more. Verses 15 to 18. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. But lift up thy rod and stretch out thine hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry land, on dry ground, through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. So before the people, Moses was full of faith. But before God, he cried out in the desperate prayer. Now, this was good because Moses had to show confidence before the nation to encourage their faith. There's always a time to pray, and there's a time to act. And it can actually be against God's will to stop doing and to only pray in particular situations. This was a time for action. And Moses could pray along the way, of course. But God says, lift up thy rod and stretch out thine hand. Now, these were simple instructions. Okay? And those instructions were connected to a mighty miracle. And in the same manner, the greatest miracle of salvation happens with simple action on our part. As the rod of Moses did not actually perform the miracle, it wasn't the rod that caused the miracle to happen. It was just the action. God made the miracle happen, but Moses had to be obedient to the action and do what God told him to do. So we do not save ourselves with what we do, but we connect with God's saving miracle. God wasn't finished answering Pharaoh's question from Exodus 5:2. You better remember what that question was? Yeah, who is this Lord that I should serve him? Who is this God that I should serve him? God used the miracle of parting of the Red Sea to speak to Egypt, as much as he used it to speak to Israel. When God delivers us from temptation or from crisis, it's as much a testimony to our invisible adversaries as it is to us. God uses each victory in our life to tell our unseen enemies of his power and his ability to work in and through our frail humanity. All right, let's look at 19 and 20. And the angel of the Lord, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. So God sent both a specifically and especially commissioned angel and the pillar of a cloud. And he put them as a barrier between Israel and the pursuing Egyptian army. So God protected Israel from the Egyptian attack until a way was made through the Red Sea. We often have little idea how much God does to protect us from attacks from our enemies. We sometimes feel that we're overwhelmed in a present spiritual struggle, but we may not know what it would be like if the Lord pulled back his protection. Think about that. God protects us from so many things that we don't even know about. And we would never know about it unless God pulled back his protection from us. The Egyptians didn't know it, but the same pillar that prevented their pursuit of Israel also protected their lives, at least for a while. If they had submitted to the Lord, who blocked their way with his presence, they would have been spared their coming destruction. The pillar was a source of darkness to the Egyptians, but it was a source of light to Israel. And this is a vivid picture of how the glory of God or the work of God can be a light to one person, yet seem dark to another person. Verses 21 to 22. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Okay. Now, we don't know exactly where this place was. Okay. We don't know what the exact geography of it was, because that area, it'll change with every flood, with every drought season. But we do know that there was enough water to trap the Israelites and to later drown the Egyptians. Now, I saw one thing that was interesting. I saw one of those on the History Channel. They were talking, they think they found the spot where Israel crossed the Red Sea. And they said the water was only a couple of feet deep, about 2 or 3 feet deep. And there's certain times when the wind would blow that it would actually blow the water off this one part of the land. And he says, and that's what happened. They went across. They said that wasn't the miracle that the children of Israel went across on dry land, because it says the wind blew and the seas parted, and we see that happening. I said, yeah, but it was still a miracle. How was it a miracle? Pharaoh's army drowned in 3 feet of water. So that was a miracle. But we can surmise that the water was a minimum of 10 feet deep. It was probably much more than that. But it had to be a minimum of 10 feet deep in order to cover them and drown them. And we can also surmise that there was enough width in the crossing for the large group of Israelites to cross in one night. Remember, there's a couple of million of these people. And they got to get across this all in one night. So we know that it had to be someplace that wasn't really long, but it had to be deep enough for it to affect Pharaoh's army. 23 to 28, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, and even Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariots' wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel. for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thy hand over the seas, that the waters may come again unto the Egyptians upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the hosts of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. So God, miraculously, of course, worked on the side of Israel against the Egyptians. He troubled the army of the Egyptians until Israel had crossed the Red Sea. He held them back. He caused them to, he gave them flat tires. He did all these things. And he held them back until all of Israel had gone across. Only then did he allow the Egyptian army to continue their pursuit through the parted waters. Though some also regarded this as simply an ancient legend, modern research again shows this is completely possible. God told Moses to do something with his hand. It was connected with the motion of the sea. We all know that it was not really the power of Moses' hand that held back the sea, or to allow it to come crashing back down upon the Egyptian army. It was the power of God at work. And God could have performed this miracle just as easily without Moses' cooperation. He didn't have to have Moses to do that, for him to do the miracle, but he did. Yet God uses people to take part in his miraculous works. Yeah. Any diving in modern times? They found in the Red Sea, they found several places to where they have found chariots that are at the bottom of the Red Sea in modern times. So, yeah, there's been some explorations like that, expeditions like that have found chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. So there's proof. There's proof. But we can say that many miraculous works of God are yet to be done because no person has stepped forth for God to use to do them. Nobody stepped forth to be the one who will stretch out their hand. In addition, this was God's vindication of Moses. Israel accused him of the lowest of motivations. Remember, you drug us out here to be killed. What are you doing? You drug us out here, and now we're all going to die. But with this work through Moses, God showed the whole nation of Israel that Moses was their chosen leader. The deliverance at the Red Sea became a turning point in Israel history. They had many troubles ahead. A lot of stuff was coming. But Pharaoh and the Egyptians would never trouble them again. Okay? Might have a lot of problems, and they were going to face a lot of problems as they went through. But Pharaoh wasn't one of them. Okay? Verses 29 to 31. We're coming to an end here. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on the left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. So this was confirmation to Israel that their deliverance from Egypt was real and it was complete. And Yes, Pharaoh was part of that army. And oppressed people are slow to believe that they're free. At least they're slow to believe that they're free while the people that oppress them, their tyrants, are still alive. So God wanted Israel to know, your oppressors are dead. God delivered Israel in seemingly impossible circumstances. And he demonstrated his faithfulness to Israel. And because of that, the people feared the Lord. And this was the result that God intended. Sadly, for Israel, they didn't stay in this place of respect and faith toward the Lord. This was probably more circumstance of feelings than it was of true faith. Because they did this place of respect for the Lord and Moses quickly, and the deliverance of the Passover and the miracles of the Red Sea go together. If not for the victory won at the Red Sea, the redemption of Passover would have meant nothing. And they would never made it to the Red Sea. Without the miracle of Passover, they would have never done it. It's the same way we were talking about Sunday, the redemption of the cross. The redemption of the cross would mean nothing without the resurrection. The two works together. The two miracles go together. They have to go together. Okay? Without the cross, there could be no resurrection. But without the resurrection, the work of the cross wouldn't be completed. It's the same way with this. Without the Passover, they would have never crossed the Red Sea. But the Red Sea, crossing of the Red Sea, didn't mean anything without the Passover. So the two go together. All right, that gets us through chapter, I didn't change that, chapter 14. Hey. So we got through a little bit earlier than what I thought. So, any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's?
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.